Each generation has its own heroes, and rarely does one of the fighters manage to perform at a high level for several decades. Vitor Belfort is an exception. He started knocking out rivals back in the 90s. In the noughties, he became the champion of UFC, and a little later set a record for the number of knockouts. Today, we will remember the twists and turns of the career of who got the nickname Phenomenon for a reason.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
Unlike many Brazilian athletes, Belfort grew up in a wealthy family. They lived in a nice place near the beach. But even in the nicest areas of Brazil, sooner or later you have to learn to stand up for yourself. At the age of 9, his father brought the younger Belfort to judo classes, but this hobby did not last long. Soon the parents separated, and the future champion of UFC actually remained under the supervision of his older sister. He was getting into bad companies more and more often. He got involved with gangs and even had drug problems. Fortunately, at the age of 12, boxing appeared in his life, and then jiu-jitsu. Vitor spent whole days in training halls, and soon found himself under the wing of the great Carlson Gracie. Normally Gracie wouldn't take guys under 18, but for Belfort's sake he made an exception. So Vitor got into the company of those who he was used to seeing on TV, or on the covers of a magazine. 8. His physical data and boxing skills perfectly suited the modified, more aggressive and forceful model of jiu-jitsu, which was created by Carlson Gracie. All this made him almost the perfect MMA fighter. In the mid-90s, Gracie left for the USA and took Belfort with him. Carlson awarded him a black belt at the age of 17, although this privilege is usually not available until his 18th birthday. In Hollywood, Vitor made a huge number of influential acquaintances. One of them was producer John Peters, the head of Sony Pictures, who had a hand in the creation of such films as Rain Man, Batman, and Ali. Thanks to him, Vitor began working with Coach Al Stankovic, who was preparing Achille Lafoy for the victorious Olympics of the 92nd year. Stanky noted that he had almost never met hands as fast as Belfort's. Before his debut in MMA, the mentor suggested that Vitor take the famous surname Gracie. But none of the clan representatives supported this idea. However, Belfort still held his first official fight under the name Victor Gracie. It was in October 1996, a tournament, which was held in Hawaii. Against him came a hefty Jones Grins, taller than 2 meters and weighing 130 kilograms. Belfort was incredibly scared, but he forgot about it after the starting gong. 20 lightning finishing blows, and 12 seconds later Victor Gracie won.
Trained by Carlson Gracie, his first UFC.
The next day, Belfort received a contract from the hands of the chief producer of UFC Art Dennis. 4 months later, he took part in the tournament at number 12. Despite his opponent's huge weight advantage, it didn't take him long to win 2 fights in an evening. At first, Trey Teldman got into a hot hand, the fight with whom the doctor stopped.
Big right hand landed. Good hands.
Really doesn't like it. That's why he's trying to get it hit.
Oh, and he got tagged.
Not necessarily anything good. He's just hitting the arm right there.
And that is it. McCarthy stepped in.
In the final, Belfort cut down the Pharaoh's cattle in 43 seconds. And officially secured the nickname Phenomenon. 19-year-old talent became the youngest winner of the tournament in the history of UFC. A few months later, he returned to the octagon, and in 52 seconds defeated the harsh Dank Cobbett by technical knockout. The defeated American almost for the first time approached his opponent and shook his hand as a sign of respect. Belfort's popularity skyrocketed. He lived in Hollywood. He regularly visited film sets and met stars of the caliber of Will Smith. To look even more impressive, Vitor worked with iron and got from 93 to 110 kilograms, destroying endurance and coordination. All this led to a defeat in the challenger match against Randy Couture. Couture correctly used the pressure, the fight at the grid, and dirty boxing. Such a fight quickly exhausted the Suede victor and provided him with the first defeat in his career. I had to rehabilitate myself after 2 months. Belfort came to the tournament in Japan and came up against his former sparring partner Joe Charles. As a result, Vitor won without a single blow, forcing the opponent to surrender after 4 minutes. This result has caused many suspicions of collusion, but Belfort did not pay attention to them and continued to strengthen his star status. In October 1998, UFC held a tournament in Brazil where they brought together 2 of the brightest talents of this country, Belfort and Vanderlei Silva. That fight was decisive for the further career of the phenomenon. He was very nervous and went into the octagon with an absolutely stony face. Already in the first minute he was forced to retreat, but he caught his opponent with a backhand and then burst into a famous series. The final combination still tops the selections of the best knockouts in the history of organizations.
It's the winner! 44 seconds of boxing in the lightweight division, maybe even. For this country.
At that time, contracts were not exclusive yet, so Vitor and his team turned their eyes to the other side of the Pacific Ocean. Pride became interested in him, the strongest organization at that time. The first fight in Japan turned out to be ambiguous. Belfort had a great start to the fight against Kazushi Sakuraba, but in one of the episodes he broke his arm and gave up the initiative. The rest of the time he worked on his back, trying to fend off violent kicks. Sakuraba won the decision and provocatively asked next time to find him a stronger opponent. Vitor dreamed of revenge, but never got a rematch. After this failure, he was subjected to accusations from his coach. Carlson Gracie did not know about the injury to his hand and was sure that his wards had passed the fight. This incident gradually turned into a serious conflict, and in the 99th year Vitor became the first to leave the team. Soon many others followed his example. Justo Manto, Liborio, Argue. In April 2000, they founded the Brazil Top Team, which Belfort joined. After the defeat from Sakuraba, the phenomenon's career slowed down a bit. He tried to fulfill an old dream and qualify for the Olympic Games as a boxer. Vitor even organized a special qualifying fight against the future pro Marcel Neves. In 4 rounds, Belfort was knocked down twice and eventually lost on points, justifying an unsuccessful performance with a knee injury. After that, he again focused on MMA and secured a solid series of victories. Under the Pride banner, Belfort decided to play the wrestler card and alternately defeated Gil Percival, Dahil Matsuri, and Bill Herring by decisions. And Bobby Souter was strangled at the beginning of the 5th minute. Almost immediately, he signed a contract for the title fight UFC against Titus Artis, but withdrew due to a hand injury. And then he took part in a popular Brazilian reality show. There he met the model Joana Prado, and the romance became a real hit. Joana became his wife, and Vitor's increased popularity ensured that his fight was broadcast on a major TV channel. A fight against Chuck Liddell was announced soon after. Vitor managed to go to the grappler tournament TDCC and take bronze in the absolute category, but then dropped out of the training process for several months. He started the camp just 3 weeks before the fight, but he was absolutely confident in his abilities. The duel gathered a huge audience at the screens. Belfort decided to fight a lot, and already in the first round he had several takedowns. Such a pace quickly affected endurance, and the phenomenon gave the initiative. Idel picked up the distance and began to hit low kicks, combinations, blows to the body. Peter occasionally hit, but still looked passive. When he realized that he was losing, Vitor increased his aggression and ran into a powerful blow in exchange. Idel finished the fight on top and won by unanimous decision. Vitor took a short break to enjoy family life and heal injuries. And after returning, he defeated Marvin Eastman in the first round, destroying the veteran with brutal knees from the clinch. Now he was waiting for a title rematch against Couture. 3 weeks before the fight, Belfort's sister disappeared right in the center of the city. This drama has become one of the main ones on Brazilian television. He appeared on the federal news and cried on the air. The management of UFC offered Vitor to give up the fight, but he decided to fight for his sister. After one of the blows, Couture had problems with the cornea of the eye, and the doctor decided to end the fight already in the first minute.
Randy's still trying to talk to the doctors, Dr. Margaret.
It looks like it's just crazy.
Belfort received the belt without any joy, with tears in his eyes, standing in a t-shirt with a photo of his sister and the inscription "Return Sistilla."
Any questions from the champion?
6 months later, he and Couture met again. The sister was never found, but Vitor still accepted the duel, despite not the best psychological state. This time Randy just crushed the opponent with his pressure. There were a lot of clinches and fights in this fight. Belfort could do absolutely nothing. At the beginning of the second round, he opened a dissection and blood flooded his face for a long time. After 3 rounds, the doctor still decided to stop the fight. This failure was just the beginning. Belfort could not concentrate on training and decided to change the situation. He traveled to different halls, changed sparring partners, and tried to start his title campaign anew. In February 2005, Vitor met with Titus Artis. In the first round, Belfort worked great on his feet, threw out a lot of combinations, and even broke his opponent's nose, but for the last minute and a half he lay on his back. In the second round, Belfort held a swipe with the help of a guillotine and treated Artis with a ground mon for several minutes. However, the last minute was left for Artis again. In the decisive 5 minutes, the tired victor could not strike a single blow and practically did not get up from the canvas. Many believed that at the end of 15 minutes the victory should have been given to Belfort, but the judges judged otherwise. Artis took over by a split decision. The unsuccessful series of the phenomenon dragged on. He spent the next 5 fights no longer in UFC. First I went to Japan and took part in the Pride Grand Prix. In the very first duel, he faced Alice Star Averin, who was not yet rocked at all. The Dutchman successfully held several takedowns and exhausted Belfort. And at the very end of the 10-minute round, he scored a knockdown. I worked a little in the and suddenly went to the guillotine. To break the series of 3 defeats, Vitor went to England and performed at the Gat Range tournament against a local guy named Anthony Wren. In the middle of the second round, Belfort landed a powerful uppercut and knocked out the Briton without finishing. Then there was a rematch against Averin, which they held under the banner of Strikes First. The Brazilian had a lot of good moments in this match. He demonstrated his speed again and turned on his hands in time, and when necessary, he connected the fight. At one point, he got out behind his back, ended up in the mount, but Averin persevered. Golanditz was saved time after time by the struggle. He made a lot of takedowns and worked on top for a long time. Belfort sometimes managed sweeps, but the judges still preferred control in the stalls and awarded the victory to Averin. Over the next 6 months, Belfort managed to fight 2 times in the Pride. Moreover, these duels turned out to be completely opposite. Japanese veteran Kazuo Takahashi practically offered no resistance and ended up in a deep knockout after 36 seconds.
Oh, that's it. Oh, that's it. Oh, my gosh, Vitor's back. I actually was about to say, I got to see Vitor train a little bit after the weigh-in, and his hands were the fastest.
And the second fight against Ol Dorson turned out to be much more difficult. Dando threw out his famous right a few times, but didn't hit, and then decided to just focus on the fight. At the end of 3 rounds, all 3 judges gave him the victory. After the fight, Belfort got caught on a banned drug. Pride did not practice doping control, but that tournament was held in Las Vegas, so after the investigation, Vitor received 9 months of disqualification. Unable to perform in the USA, he returned to the British Catch Reg, where he finally managed to reach a series of 2 victories and won the light heavyweight championship belt. In the wake of this local success, Belfort is invited to a completely new and extremely ambitious promotion called Affliction. He is immediately given several $100,000 and is offered 2 middleweight fights. The first victim was Terry Martin, who managed to scare Belfort with several hits, but in the middle of the second round he paid for it.
One right now, and that's a finishing punch. Randy Couture knocked out by that knee, and here's
The second fight turned out even better. Olympic medalist and veteran of the UFC Matt Lingland unsuccessfully shortened the distance and went to the knockout after 37 seconds.
Lindland inside and bang! Overhand left, right on the chin to that right hand, set it up, bing!
The phenomenon found itself again and finally found a suitable camp, having got into extreme couture. You have to spend the night in the hall. You have to smell the hall. Forget about me and the kids and be successful. These were the motivating words of his wife. Vitor listened and moved to Las Vegas to fully devote himself to training. A series of 4 wins convinced UFC to call Belfort back as soon as the offline ceased to exist. Dana White not only gave him a contract, but immediately put him in the main event of the evening, against former champion Richard Franklin. For 3 minutes, Vitor did nothing.
Uppercut. Caught him. He heard Franklin is in trouble. Belfort looking to finish. He's out.
the phenom!
And then I finished everything with the first episode. The bright finish brought not only a bonus for the best knockout of the evening, but also a title chance. From that moment, a fierce confrontation with Anderson Silva began. Their duel was postponed several times and took place only in February 11th of the year. 46 Brazilian journalists came to cover it. Unprecedented coverage for South America. After a tense stand down, the rivals spent only 3.5 minutes in the octagon. Belfort occupied the center, but he made his first serious attack only at the end of the 3rd minute. And after another 40 seconds, Vitor missed the legendary front kick.
Wow.
After this victory, Silva became a superstar, surpassing the popularity of many football stars of his country. And Belfort returned with a series of 2 victories. In August, he knocked out Japanese playboy Yoshihiro Akiyama in less than 2 minutes.
Vitor Belfort trying to finish his fight. That's it. Vitor Belfort.
6 months later, he had a fight with Anthony Johnson, but the American failed to weigh in. So the fight took place in the intermediate category and with one condition. On the day of the fight, Ramble was supposed to weigh no more than 93 kilograms. He went into the cage absolutely exhausted and choked at the end of the first round.
This guy's hips down. And win here at home. This could be it. That's it. It's all over. It is all over.
After 2 wins, Belfort decided to move to Florida and settle in the Black Zillions Hall. He was preparing to fight against Vanderlei Silva. But a month before the tournament, he dropped out due to a broken arm. After that, Vitor openly stated that he was thinking about switching to light heavyweight, and on average he was now interested only in the title fight. Surprisingly, both of these statements came true after a few months. Lista Macheta refused the title fight against Jon Jones, and the champion was left without an opponent. Belfort took the fight and was millimeters away from creating a sensation. He never made a reception from the back, but in the first round he unexpectedly caught Jones on a tight arm bar, from which it was possible to get out only by a miracle. Jones endured, and before that completely controlled the course of the fight, putting the squeeze on the Brazilian in the fourth round. In general, I was sure that he would knock. I heard a crunch and thought I had broken his arm. At that moment, I already had thoughts in my head that the referee would stop the fight, but in the next second, everything changed. This is MMA. Despite the total failure, Belfort was still determined to win the title. In January of the 13th, he returned to middleweight and faced Michael Bisping, who had won 5 of the last 6 fights. The Briton carefully worked from a distance and did not allow himself to take unnecessary risks. But in the last seconds of the first round, Belfort launched his trademark high kick and tried to finish off, but did not have time.
Kick that hurt Bisping. Yeah, set up nicely by the left hand and Vitor Belfort.
After the break, he waited for the moment again and threw the same shot. This time Bisping fell, and after a few seconds the fight was over. Vitor won the prize for the best knockout of the evening.
He landed it in the first round and he landed it in the second to get the...
And Michael was forever deprived of the ability to see normally with his right eye. In May, Belfort again led the tournament. He had the honor to welcome to the UFC the young Luke Rockhold, who came as the champion of Strikeforce and led a series of 9 victories. The Brazilian had only 2.5 minutes to make the knockout of the year and get another bonus at the end of the evening.
Spinning kick, look at how he looked at the target. And that right there is one of the best knockouts in mixed martial arts history.
After the fight, Belfort had no doubt that he would get a title rematch against Anderson Silva as soon as Spider dealt with Chris Weidman. But after 2 months, a sensation broke out. Then a repeat fight was scheduled, and the veteran had to postpone his title ambitions. He did not sit around and agreed to meet with Dan Henderson in the light heavyweight division. The long-awaited rematch led the tournament in Brazil and gathered full stands in the arena. It took Belfort 1.5 minutes to catch his opponent with a high kick and arrange another beautiful finish.
Vitor Belfort trying to finish off Henderson. Huge kick. Vitor Belfort has done it again.
The 43-year-old Hender had never lost by knockout before. It seemed that now nothing would prevent the phenomenon from challenging the title, but the next year and a half was a severe test for him. It turned out that Belfort was one of the 14 fighters in which the Nevada Athletic Commission, as an exception, allowed the use of testosterone therapy. The fight against Chris Weidman was supposed to take place on UFC 173. However, 4 months before the tournament, Belfort was caught on an elevated testosterone level. The Athletic Commission did not disqualify him, instead offered a trial period of several months. Belfort passed all the tests, but was seriously criticized by colleagues and noticeably dropped in muscle mass. He and Weidman finally met in the title event of the UFC 187 tournament. A minute after the start, Belfort went ahead and had a great series. The American withstood, took a deep breath, and almost immediately held a takedown. In the next minute, Chris managed to improve his position. He got out into the mount, inflicted several dozen unanswered blows, which brought him victory by technical knockout. Belfort was still in the top 5, but he is already 38, and the ban on DZT seriously affected his form. He once again got the opportunity to lead the tournament in Brazil, and his rivals discharged Dan Henderson, who was ranked 12th. The decisive duel of the trilogy lasted 2 minutes. The key to victory was high kick again. After this fight, he became firmly entrenched in the UFC record book for a long time, since he had the largest number of knockouts in the history of the promotion and the largest number of finishes in the first round. At the same time, Belfort became the first who managed to issue scouts in 3 divisions at once. Unfortunately, the phenomenon will never be the same, and increasingly began to talk about retirement. To decide on this step, he was probably prevented by a huge contract under which Vitor received $300,000 per fight. He lost in the stalls to Ronaldo Souza. Then he could not compete with either Kigorda Musashi or Kelvin Gastel. Both won by technical knockouts. The fight with Gastelum was subsequently declared invalid, but this did not change the essence. Belfort could not boast, neither speed nor power, not enough motivation. He won his last career victory against Nate Marquardt at a numbered tournament in Brazil. Vitor walked forward to the roar of the audience and constantly tried to aggravate. In an equal match, the judges predictably gave lunch to Belfort, and he decided to wait until the end of his career. In May of the 18th, Vitor helplessly collapsed on the canvas after the front kick of 39-year-old Letici Machida. This fight was the last for both under the banner UFC. Vitor nevertheless announced his retirement and disappeared from sight for a while. But then he talked about returning several times. Briefly signed up with the Asian promotion Vans. I had an argument with blogger Tarzan, and now he is preparing to box against 58-year-old Evander Holyfield. Belfort has always been considered the darling of fate. As a teenager, he trained with the best jiu-jitsu masters, hanging out with Hollywood stars, got the most desirable girl in Brazil. He became a champion in the world's most prestigious promotion. He has almost 25 years of successful career behind him, and a huge number of records. And even if he couldn't leave on time, Vitor Belfort will forever remain a phenomenon who managed to get several generations of rivals out of the way at once. That's it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.